The marathon continues. The fact commands and window work for you. Thank you for being with us. The water level in Ingulka is gradually falling. There is no threat of new flooding. The military administration of Kryvyi Rih reported this morning. In order to increase the throughput at night, 2 dams had to be blown up. Let me remind you that on the evening of September 14th, the Russians damaged the dam in Kryvyi Rih. 7 rockets hit it. Repair work is currently underway. In total, more than 100 residential buildings were flooded. Evacuation of people from flooded areas took place since midnight. The military administration assures that drinking water is already available in almost all districts of the city, except for one. Utility workers found another damage to the water pipe. Kristina Vangelioskate will tell in more detail. On this street in Kryvyi Rih alone, water flooded a dozen houses. They stand right next to the Ingulets River. After yesterday's Russian attack on the city's critical infrastructure, the water level in the city rose to 2 meters. Mrs. Tamara's yard in the water. The basement flooded. Fortunately, the water did not reach the house. Now everything is completely flooded. Garden, cellars. Thank God, there is no water in the house. The enemy struck hydraulic facilities in Kryvyi Rih with Kinjal and Iskander missiles. All night long, utility workers eliminated the consequences of the shelling. In the morning, the water level in the river was lowered by 40 centimeters.
Speech by the head of the military administration Alexander Vilkel. Necessary measures were taken to eliminate the consequences of the enemy strike. Further down the river, in the Kornahorka area, we blew up a dam. This will increase the carrying capacity of the channel. Other major engineering works were carried out. The movement of water has decreased significantly.
Water flooded more than 100 houses. The private sector suffered the most. At night, the city organized 4 collection points for the evacuation of citizens. This required 11 people. Mr. Alexander left with his family. The first floor of his house was flooded. Now he walks down the street in boots. He says he cannot do without them.
Now above the knee, that's about it. Approximately 800 millimeters. The first floor was completely flooded. We decided not to risk it. In addition, there was information that there is a risk that the water will rise to the second floor. Why risk it? We have a small child. That's why we left here. Now I'm back, but I have to wear tall rubber boots.
The parks of Kryvyi Rih were also flooded. In one, for example, the water level rose by 174 centimeters. Right next to the park, people travel by boat. A local resident transports people. This is how we get home. We went to the grocery store. Carefully. Several water pipes were damaged due to the rocket attack. Water supply has already been restored in almost the entire city, except for a small area. There is no water supply in Lozovatska and Sofievska territorial communities. Almost 6,000 people remain without water. Kristina Vangelioskate, Denis Sinigan, Fakti ICTV, Edini News. At midnight, the Russians destroyed a high-rise building in Bakhmut. 4 people can be under the rubble. Rescuers are working on the spot. Bakhmut remains one of the most dangerous places in the Donetsk region, say the regional military administration. In the previous day, 9 civilians were wounded in this city. In Toretsk, the Russians targeted a hospital. They injured 1 person. The explosion shattered windows in the surgical, children's and maternity wards. Also, a night of flight of service, private house damage. In the morning, there was massive shell in Evka. The consequences are still being established. In general, the police of the Donetsk region calculated that 13 populated areas of the region came under the fire of the occupiers during the day. Vladislav Kruglov's report from Mykolaiivka, Donetsk region, which was destroyed the day before.
I woke up to the house jumping. The explosion was powerful. Mr. Stanislav remembers last night with a smile on his face. Alive, and that's good, says the man. The day before, at 12 o'clock in the morning, the Russians fired 2 S-300 rockets at Kramatorsk. One of them landed in the private sector between people's houses. I go out, and here it is. It burned inside. Chopped down the roof horse. The rocket must have gone tangentially. Then there was the engine. It is about 3 meters long. Such a kind fool. Local residents were lucky that the rocket did not explode. However, even without detonating, it damaged 3 houses and destroyed a garage. He burned to the ground. Locals say that this is not the first time that the Russians have shelled this part of the city in recent days. The day before yesterday, it also got into the garage in another place. There was a large garage. It is now completely destroyed. And today the rocket arrived here. There are at least some communications in Kramatorsk, and the Russians fire at the city only with rockets, because the artillery does not reach here. Mykolaiivka, which is a few kilometers from the occupied territory, suffers from Russian shelling from all available weapons. People here live without electricity, water and gas. We need hot water because Mom wants to wash. Mother. "80 years. To my mother. Mostly elderly people and those who care for them remained in the city. It is not possible to lead a normal life in the city. Serena doesn't turn off here, and flies to houses several times a day. Racists aim at both civilians and objects that do not have any strategic importance. This is a sports complex. There were gyms here. Children's sports classes were held here. Judo, boxing. A modern Olympic-level sports complex in Mykolaiivka, where the relay teams of Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Druzhkivka and Kostiantynivka went to compete. The Russians destroyed it the night before. Locals say there was an air raid on the city. It was a miracle that no one was hurt.
There was a powerful blow. The earth flew to the center of the city. There are no victims. Only windows and balconies were damaged. Some had their doors blown off. The pharmacy was damaged. Of course, it's a pity that our city's beautiful appearance was spoiled.
Almost everything was destroyed in Mykolaiivka. The Russians did not leave a single surviving place in the settlement. A month ago, the city was relatively intact. Locals say that in recent weeks the occupiers seem to have gone mad. Because they hit the houses with aim, several times a day, with weapons of different calibers. Missiles and aerial bombs fly here. Vladislav Kruglov, Yevhen Tur, Vitaly Chumik, Fakti ICTV, Single News.
The draft state budget for 2023 has already been submitted to the Verkhovna Rada. Government officials propose to allocate half of its expenses to security and defense. This is 4 times more than in this year's estimate. The head of the Committee on Finance, Tax and Customs Policy, Danilo Hetmantsev, spoke about the main budget figures. The country's budget differs from all previous times of Ukraine's independence. It is called the war budget, in which everything is for victory, Hetmantsev emphasized. In his opinion, the parameters are unique, but realistic for implementation. Therefore, the deputies should support and approve them. The main source of financing will be borrowing income, which will increase. At the same time, expenses for the state apparatus will be reduced by 11 billion, and there will be no traditional socio-economic development. This is what the deputies have always asked for in their constituencies.
More than 50% of the budget will go to defense and security. This is absolutely justified. 35% of the budget goes to social welfare. This includes various articles: medicine, pensions, subsidies, social assistance.
Russia's financial sector suffered hundreds of billions of dollars in direct losses due to large-scale Western sanctions. This was reported by the Bloomberg agency, which received an internal document of the Russian Ministry of Finance. It talks about the losses of stock markets, banking and financial sectors. $300 billion of frozen reserves of the central bank were also mentioned. 4.6 trillion rubles of frozen eurobonds. 40% of the capitalization of the stock market. 10% of bank capital and 563 billion rubles of frozen retail assets. Also, analysts note the negative impact of the disconnection of some Russian banks from the SWIFT system. And Russia's loss of access to special equipment and software. The Russian army may collapse before the end of the year. Its probability is almost 40%, said ex-marshal of the Royal Air Force Edward Stringer. He believes that the Ukrainian army can win before Christmas, that is, before December 25. The British ex-marshal admitted that he used to think that Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine would drag on until next year. A rapid counteroffensive by the Ukrainian military changed the situation, so now, Stringer hopes, Kyiv will be able to start negotiations on favorable terms. Already now, Europeans have to think about what the world will be like in the post-Putin era. The Ukrainian sky will become even more protected. Germany handed over to Ukraine 4 additional anti-aircraft Cheetah self-propelled artillery installations. In addition, in the near future we will receive 6 more such samples. They are already being prepared for shipment. This was announced by the German government. 24 cheetahs are currently in service in Ukraine. Anti-aircraft self-propelled artillery can fire at a rate of up to 1,000 rounds per minute. Also, official Kyiv received 65 refrigerators for medical supplies. In general, Germany has already provided Ukraine with weapons worth more than $1 billion. The killer of 7 servicemen can be released without punishment. 2 years ago, the whole country was shocked by the news. In Zhytomyr Oblast, during a feast, a local resident shot a company of comrades. All of them were veterans of the ATO and fighters of the legendary battalion named after Kolchitsky, which since 2014 participated in fierce battles for the liberation of Ukraine. So, beforehand, the men gathered near the lake in the village of Novozlitsa for fishing. Late in the evening, when most of the soldiers went to sleep, Anatoly Zakharenko took a rifle and opened fire. Initially, 2 veterans who were sitting at the same table with the attacker were fatally wounded. Then he shot 3 people who were sleeping. Only 1 person managed to escape. Currently, the accused can be released after 2 years of imprisonment in the pre-trial detention center.
The material states that on July 27, 2022, the judge changed the pre-trial detention measure to 24-hour house arrest. Immediately after changing the preventive measure, Judge Natalia Gulag suddenly recuses herself. After that, the case was stopped. To continue the process, the court must appoint new judges. This should be done by September 24. If a trio of courts is not appointed by that date and a new court session is not held, the murderer of 7 people will become a free man. The widow of one of the victims says. For more details, see the Ukrainian version at the link in the video description.